a theater devoted to the dark side of conquest. From underground chambers, they entered the most infamous stage of the ancient world. The time was 80 AD. They called their new arena the Colosseum. The opening ceremonies lasted 100 days. 10,000 wild animals were slaughtered for the sake of entertainment. Helpless prisoners of war were butchered by the hundreds, and 3,000 gladiators fought, many to the death. "14 stories high, the Colosseum dominated the Roman skyline. 50,000 spectators sat on bleachers supported by stone vaults and arches. We now know how the Colosseum was built. The question is, why? Why did Romans come here to celebrate death? Had world conquest produced a society of cold-blooded killers? Keith Hopkins from Cambridge University believes the games are a key to understanding the Roman Empire.
The Romans had conquered an empire covering the whole of the Mediterranean basin, including roughly 1/5 of the then world's population. You don't get to be masters of an empire by being nice to your subjects. Of their tradition of warfare. Gladiatorial fights were domesticated battles inside the very heart of empire.
Based on the work of scholars, Hollywood studios recreated the bizarre spectacles and blood games at the Colosseum.
Imagine this.
Emperors had little tolerance for human error during the extravagant performances. When stagehands bumbled the sets for one competition, the Emperor Claudius ordered them all into the arena and killed. The shows were all-day affairs. In the morning, criminals were fed to wild beasts.
The Romans spent a huge amount of time and effort bringing together animals from all over the world with the crowd. And only after that, as the peak of the performance, in the afternoon, were gladiatorial fights. Gladiators were popular heroes. They were men of great virility, or so it was thought. The word gladius, from which gladiator comes, means sword. It also means penis. And I suppose gladiators in popular imagination were associated with erect penises.
The warriors even took stage names based on sex appeal and better of young girls at night. Another gladiator was called Cellidus Puellarum Bacchus, Lord of the Maidens. Gladiators specialized. Their weapons and styles of fighting often copied combat with enemies defeated in the past. Through these bloody reenactments, the crowds relived the glory of Roman conquest. One Roman intellectual was disgusted by both the games and the spectators.
The Roman people are absorbed by two things above all: their food and their entertainment.
But the Roman obsession with violence should come as no surprise. The founding of Rome itself was described in an ancient myth filled with intrigue and danger. In that story, a princess gave birth to twin boys, Romulus and Remus, heirs to the throne. To steal the kingdom, a wicked uncle cast the infants into the Tiber River. In myth, the brothers, saved and nurtured by a great she-wolf, would found the city of Rome. In reality, the early Romans did more than just build a city. More than 200 years before the birth of Christ, they dominated Italy. From Britain to the Near East, an empire of 2 million square miles would bow before Rome. And the city flourished. 1 million people crowded its jumbled streets and broad avenues. 12 languages rang through her plazas, just as they do today. Gauls, Syrians, Jews, and Egyptians exchanged ideologies, goods, and ideas. Rome was enriched by mathematics from the Near East, philosophy and medicine from the Greeks. The grand achievement that was ancient Rome seems even more impressive today. Archaeologist Dr. James Packer.
This is the model of Imperial Rome, which Mussolini had constructed in the late 1930s. And the purpose of this model was to show how grandiose Rome was and consequently glorify Mussolini himself, who very much liked to think of himself as a kind of contemporary Roman emperor. The city is filled with enormous public buildings. Part of the purpose of these public buildings was to make sure that the common people were given a chance to participate in the grandeur of the empire.
Of all Rome's monumental structures, only the Pantheon survives intact. Its great vaulted dome, 142 feet wide, is the largest curved ceiling of the ancient world. At its zenith, an eye opens to the heavens. Created by the Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century AD, the Pantheon celebrates all the gods of the empire. Its bronze doors open to Romans and pilgrims alike. In the ancient port of Ostia, 6-story apartment buildings were commonplace. Upper and lower class Romans were vertically segregated. The lower your income, the higher you lived. Most families slept in 1- or 2-room flats, but the lives of true Romans were lived in the streets. Both rich and poor met in great forums and public baths. And all citizens were equal and welcome when it came to nature's most basic needs.
You could come in, you could sit down, you could ease yourself, you could discuss politics with your friends. You might meet any of your neighbors, from people who worked in the local shops to the attendants at the baths, perhaps even one of the highest members of the Austrian aristocracy. All of these people would be here together in this room in a kind of public conviviality, celebrating the functions that we keep most private among modern Americans.
Rome's public monuments created a sense of order and security. But the obsession with conquest shifted inordinate power into the hands of the military, and soon, one man's brazen ambition would send rumblings of alarm throughout the Republic. In the 1st century BC, the armies of Julius Caesar destroyed the tribes of Gaul and crushed his enemies in North Africa. In 49 BC, despite growing civil unrest, Caesar staged an extravagant victory celebration. Petronius, a Roman writer, reflected on the lust for power.
It seemed as if the entire world was in the hands of the victorious Romans. They possessed the earth and the seas and the stars, but were not satisfied.
Neither was Caesar. For centuries, Roman authority rested in the hands of a Senate, elected by the ruling class. In 45 BC, Caesar declared himself dictator, the first of the Roman Empire. Many senators were outraged to see the old republic go. Then, on March 15th, 44 BC, the arrogant Caesar came to the Forum. In revenge for Caesar's assassination, his allies slaughtered 300 senators. 13 years of civil war followed. Roman soldiers died by the tens of thousands. The empire was saved by Caesar's adopted son, Augustus. Barely out of his teens, Augustus crushed or killed all who stood in his way. In Rome, Ronald Mallour of UCLA visits an altar dedicated to the emperor's greatest achievement.
It's the beginning of a peace, we call it the Roman peace, the Pax Romana, that would last almost 2 centuries. The Mediterranean was probably more peaceful during that period than it has ever been since.
Augustus used his dictatorial powers to strengthen the state rather than destroy it. He created a skilled bureaucracy and governed an empire held together by the military's greatest victory: a bloodless battle with geography itself. Roman legions built 50,000 miles of paved highways and 200,000 miles of roads to the outskirts of conquest. Using this vast network, the Roman army could react quickly to enemy attacks. Julius Caesar once traveled 800 miles in just 8 days, and the Roman Pony Express moved twice as fast. Letters crossed the empire in a matter of weeks, the fastest postal system in the world until the invention of the railroad. Along these imperial highways flowed the lifeblood of the ultimate empire. From Syria came Chinese silks and glassware. From South Arabia, exotic perfumes and incense. Trade goods traveled to seaports and across the Mediterranean to the capital. The Roman mission to control world trade would lead them to a mysterious outpost in what is today the land of Jordan. In the 2nd century AD, the Roman army closed in on a city that guarded the only passage through the mountains of Jordan. It was the capital of a people called the Nabateans, a crossroads for caravans headed north, and a key to empire the Romans had to have. In 1809, the Swiss explorer John Burckhardt heard rumors of a wondrous mountain city carved into solid rock. The territory was controlled by fierce Muslim nomads. Burckhardt posed as a religious pilgrim. If his true identity was revealed, he'd be killed. But the nomads led Burckhardt through a gash of vertical rock into the lost city of Petra. 300 years before the birth of Christ, the Nabateans flourished here. Their architecture was influenced by trade with the Greeks. But Burckhardt and the explorers who followed saw evidence the Romans had been here as well. Roman legionnaires built this road through the center of town in the 1st century AD. Why did the military add to the value of Petra rather than simply plunder its treasures? Why spare the Nabateans? The answer cuts to the core of Roman foreign policy. The Romans gave all conquered lands a choice: cooperate with the empire and enjoy the protection of its army, resist and be crushed under its might. Dr. Pierre Bicay is director of excavation at Petra for ACOR, the American Center for Oriental Research in Jordan.
Why did the Romans come here? The Roman elite craved perfumes and commodities, like incense, which came from India and Yemen. These things had to pass through here. Petra controlled a key point in a gigantic trade system, the only access to this entire region.
Romans became insatiable consumers, and Petra controlled the flow of luxuries from the east. Wisely, the Nabateans became a Roman province. In return, they kept a piece of the action and continued to thrive. But between trading hubs like Petra and Roman shipping ports in the Near East were vast wastelands filled with nomadic raiders. How did the Romans keep them from cutting into the pipeline? One solution would astonish photographer and journalist Jane Taylor. With help from the Royal Jordanian Air Force, Taylor was flying over the desert when she spotted a string of Roman forts or castles. One, in particular, called Bashir, took her breath away.
And the first time I saw this castle, Qasr al-Bashir, was on my way to Petra, in fact. I wasn't photographing here at all. And we overflew it, and there was nothing around at all. And this little dot of a castle. When we got closer, and you could see the towers and some of it crumbling away. But actually the whole thing in extraordinarily good condition. When you see a fort in the middle of nothingness, you wonder what on earth they were doing, putting it here.
Centuries ago, Roman legionnaires manned the towers of Bashir. Today, the Jordanian Desert Police stand watch over these ancient outposts.
أهلا وسهلا.
كيف حالكم؟ احنا من مركز امريكي جين تايلر سبيك فيما.
سليمان فيصل.
ممكن هنا بشوف تطلع فوق بشوف.
To complete her research, Taylor returns to Bashir with ACOR archaeologist Zbigniew Fima.
Wow, you can see right around.
Well, the forts and watchtowers serve not only to protect the caravans and traffic on the major routes, but also to inform the authorities about any enemy passing from the east, to monitor the movement of people, especially in east-west direction. Observe that the forts can be seen from the distance. In other words, the visual communication is preserved. Over there's one fort, then ours, then when you pass farther south there's another one. There's also a fort up there. So all the forts and the watchtowers could communicate relatively easy.
By constructing their forts in a direct line of sight, the Romans created a cunning early warning system. At day's end, a weary caravan could find protection within the courtyards of Fort Bashir. Long before sunrise, the drivers would know if it was safe to move on. Using torch code by night and smoke signals by day, Roman legionnaires sent alerts on enemy movements in a matter of minutes to forts 20 miles away. The pipeline of empire was secured. From Jordan to the forests of Europe, the backbone of Rome's formidable rule was her military. A legionnaire's life was both dangerous and demanding. In pursuit of Roman enemies, soldiers were loaded down with 60 pounds of gear and expected to march 24 miles every 5 hours. Even at that speed, the Roman Empire was so vast that it would take 5 months to march from Petra to Rome's most distant outpost in the British Isles. Here, an army built for battle became an army of occupation. For Dr. Robin Beerley, they've never left.
We always wondered what the Romans did actually call the natives, and there you are, Britunculi, wretched Brits.
That's it. Well done.
Undaunted, Dr. Beerley slogs through knee-deep muck for remains from Roman times.
Ease it up.
Beerley arrives home bearing gifts for his wife and partner, Patricia. A fresh batch of Roman relics for analysis in their country laboratory. Beerley's hunting ground lies along the greatest military barrier of the Western world, Hadrian's Wall. Marking the northern edge of the Roman Empire, it runs 73 miles from the Tyne estuary to the Irish Sea.
It was the Emperor Hadrian who took one look at his virtually empty treasury in Rome and said, this centuries-old policy of fighting and acquiring more territory has got to stop. It is ridiculous. We can't afford it. And so everywhere from Jordan in the east right across to here on Hadrian's Wall in the northwest, he said frontiers, permanent frontiers, must be built. Now, this was for 2 reasons. In the first place, it was to tell the opposition, the barbarians, that this was where Rome was going to stop. There wasn't going to be any more fighting. And it was also to ensure that his army was kept busy for as long as possible, because a big army with no fighting is dangerous. Now, it so happens the army had already been in occupation of this area for 40 years, and the soldiers must have wondered, why on earth are we bothering with this? You can't get an army down through the centre here. It's all bogs and swamps for 40 or 50 miles to the north. But the emperor said, build it. So they built it.
After a hard day's work, Hadrian's men returned to a string of forts built near the wall. This one, called Vindolanda, was excavated by Beerley and his father before him. In 1973, while excavating a new section of the fort, Beerley made a miraculous discovery.
What's happening down here, then?
The chemical composition of the wet peat had preserved a Roman garbage dump. But what garbage it was!
Boots and shoes started to pour out, and other leather objects. Bronze items coming out shining like gold. Feathers, insects. It was a different world altogether down there.
It soon became clear that Vindolanda was more than just a fort. It was a thriving community.
We have soldiers here, their wives and children with them, and occasionally you find a little object which brings the whole thing to life, like this little latticework shoe. You can see the holes there, probably worn with a gaily coloured woolen sock, which would make it look very attractive. Small studs on the bottom to preserve the life of the shoe, and really a very delightful object. You can almost feel the foot of the child in that shoe as you hold it in your hand today.
But Robin Beerley's garbage dump was about to yield a major breakthrough in Roman archaeology.
Amongst all this material, there was a lot of wood, and amongst it all, we found a number of rather oily-looking little shavings. And then one day, I got a couple of these things, and I saw the two stuck together, and I just gently peeled them apart. And I couldn't believe what I saw. It looked as though there were sort of Egyptian hieroglyphics on there or something. And I turned to one of the other excavators and said, "Look, what do you think of that?" He said, "Good God, it's writing." And I've never seen anything like it before, and I thought I would never experience again the same kind of sensation.
A local university provided infrared photography. Beerley soon realized his garbage dump included a Roman mailbox. Written in Latin on shavings of wood were letters from the past.
We were hoping for some great military information, and it was difficult to translate, and we eventually got it, and it basically said, "Greetings to a few men, and I'm sending you a present. It's a parcel of socks, shoes, and subligaria." Well, I didn't know what subligaria meant, so we searched the dictionaries, and it was underpants. And we thought, oh, God, this is a great disappointment. But actually, in some ways, it was very appropriate that the first message was something intensely personal and private, not the kind of message which would ever go down in history. But that really introduced us to the ordinary people of Vindolanda.
You build up a story, a picture of these people. And although we have no idea what they physically looked like, inevitably in your own mind, you start to imagine these people.
Letters of encouragement crossed the English Channel from the heart of empire in Rome. This one, from Niger and Brocas, was sent to their brother Flavius, an officer at Vindolanda.
We hope, brother, that what you are about to do will be most successful. It will be so indeed, because it is both in accord with our wishes to make this prayer on your behalf, and you yourself are most worthy.
One soldier's letter proves there was a system of military justice even on the fringe of empire.
I implore you not to allow me, an innocent person, to be beaten with rods. I am an innocent man and should not be treated in this manner no matter what the crime.
Most touching of all, perhaps, was this letter from one army wife to another.
Claudia Severa to her Lepidina. I send you a warm invitation to come to us on September 11th for my birthday celebrations, to make my day more enjoyable by your presence. I will expect you, sister. Farewell, my dearest soul.
If you didn't know where the document had come from, you'd think this was a letter between two aristocratic ladies from Rome to the next door city. And yet, in fact, that letter is written in newly conquered territory on the rim of the earth, as far as the Romans were concerned, around the year 100 AD. One just did not expect that kind of society to have been established so soon after the conquest.
Letters sent from another age are delivered at last. Better late than never. For now we know that tenderness had its place even in this hard-scrabble corner of the empire. From Jordan to Hadrian's Wall, the sacrifices of military families allowed hundreds of Roman cities to grow and prosper. Throughout the Mediterranean, ancient trade centers blossomed beneath the imperial sun. Large audiences crowded provincial theaters for shows on tour from Rome. Comedians joked about the sexual escapades of the rich and powerful back in the capital. But one ancient city in southern Italy epitomized the commerce, prosperity, and vitality enjoyed at the heart of empire. Its streets were alive into the night. Molten rock shot 17 miles into the sky at twice the speed of sound. The killer, the volcano Vesuvius. An eyewitness wrote this chilling account.
Darkness overspread us, not like that of a moonless or cloudy night, but of a room when it is shut up and the lamp put out. You could hear the shrieks of women and children crying, and the shouts of men. Some were seeking their children, others their parents, some praying to die from the very fear of dying, many lifting their hands to the gods, but the greater part imagining that there were no gods left anywhere. That the last and eternal night was come upon the world.
Peer out from another world and ask us to remember the city they loved and lost. The blanket of volcanic ash has been lifted away. Once more, the Mediterranean sun warms the rooftops of Pompeii. Within the mansions of the dead, the sounds of life can be heard again. Through the efforts of dedicated archaeologists, a surprising mosaic of everyday life is revealed. In 1860, Giuseppe Fiorelli made the first systematic excavation of Pompeii. From earthen molds, the victims emerged. In a last attempt to save his family, a man is paralyzed in death. Dr. Baldassare Conticello is superintendent of the Pompeii site. The sudden death of this city has added a new dimension to his view of archaeology.
My feelings about Pompeii were so strong that after 30 years of archaeology, when I arrived here, I thought I was about to start my career all over again. They're crowded with objects which were there in that very moment. In brief, we relive these moments before our eyes by pulling away the ashes. This is what I call emotional archaeology.
As Pompeii awoke from its long sleep, a portrait of the sensuous lives of the Roman people emerged. Erotic frescoes rescued from her walls, love-crazed fawns raised from the ashes, and graffiti galore.
Artemides got me pregnant!
Blightus, you are a mediocre man.
Oh, Caius, I hope that your ulcerous pustules reopen and burn even more than they did before.
Beneath a once quiet Vesuvius, Pompeii enjoyed the fruits of imperial expansion. It was a time when Mediterranean cities mimicked the urban plan of Rome. From her temples, priests gave thanks to Isis, a god adopted from conquered Egypt. Gossip echoed from the public baths. Along shop-lined streets, the rich browsed through silks from China, incense and perfumes from Petra, and a lavish array of exotic foods. Dr. Jennifer Roberts has come from the State University of New York to study the lifestyles of the ancient Romans.
Naturally, the extent of the Roman Empire opened up a wide variety of foods to the Romans they wouldn't have had access to before. They got cherries from the Black Sea, they got pepper from the Far East. The finest mackerel you got from Cartagena in Spain, which the Romans had taken over from Carthage during their war with Hannibal. Romans didn't eat very much during the day. They would start the day with a piece of bread, and at lunch, they would have more bread, maybe a little piece of cheese and some olives, some salad.
But at day's end, the lean diets of the wealthy could suddenly expand, along with their waistlines. Lavish dinner banquets brought friends together. With plenty of slaves to feed them and clean up the mess, Romans would become notorious for their indulgent feasts. The bars stayed open all night. The cuisine was best described as fatty, soft, and slightly rotten. Wild boar and stuffed dormice were preferred when aged to the point of smelling slightly rank. And while fresh fruit was available, apples ran a poor third behind milk-fed snails. But accounts of wild orgies for dessert remain a point of pure speculation. What is known is that this male-dominated society lived by a familiar double standard. Women who committed adultery could be exiled, but it was perfectly legal for their husbands to visit the local house of prostitution. In Pompeii's most notorious bordello, the stalls of ancient prostitutes have been uncovered. Above each door, a cartoon of the vendor's specialty.
There weren't an awful lot of jobs for women, but two of the most common were working in the cloth trade and working in the prostitution trade. There was a rumor that the Empress of Rome, the wife of Claudius, did choose to work in a brothel much like this one. She's one of the few women in ancient Rome rumored to have worked for what I guess we'd call today personal fulfillment. The story was that she would sneak out of the imperial quarters at night, and went to a brothel where she set up a stall under the name of Lykiska, the wolf girl, and that she enjoyed her work so very much that when the owner of the establishment dismissed the girls at the end of the night, she preferred to stay on and left only with the greatest regret.
Seen through windows like Pompeii, Roman values are not as distant as we might have imagined. Romans were fascinated by death and violence. Their leaders were capable of greatness, but far from infallible. And the Roman people faced both joys and hardships in everyday life, a day at a time. As the first wave of ash fell on Pompeii, a doomed Roman wrote this on his bedroom wall: "Nothing in the world can endure forever." By the end of the 3rd century AD, the same could be said of the Roman Empire. Corruption in high places and military disasters abroad began to erode the foundation of Roman society. From the east, the Persians burst through the imperial frontiers. From the north, the German tribes united and pushed south.
Behind the Germans were the Huns, and behind the Huns there were other people pushed out of Central Asia. That inexorable pressure kept pushing.
The Roman Empire looked very attractive, so the barbarians imitated the Romans with such success that eventually they beat them using Roman tactics.
The government didn't work very well. It didn't protect people. It didn't allow them enough personal freedom. It constantly intruded in their lives, and the result was that they simply rejected it. So while it's often said that the barbarians came in and took over the Roman world, the fact was that the barbarians could never have gotten in if they hadn't been welcomed enthusiastically by people who lived in the West.
For some Romans, the end of the Western Empire was the natural product of time. The great theologian Augustine put it best:
"If what God has made will one day vanish, then surely what Romulus made will disappear much sooner."
But Rome's inevitable decline pales in the light of its achievements. The peace of Augustus reigned throughout the Western world for 200 years, a record unmatched in history. The very words we speak owe their shape and sound to the Romans. English, Italian, French, and Spanish all spring from the Latin tongue. Our love letters and newspapers, literature and shopping lists, all written with the Roman alphabet. Roman words, Roman laws, Roman architecture still shape the world today. In the end, the lasting glory of the ultimate empire is that its best parts have become a part of us.